Hey guys, how are things? We're back, and I want to show you a knife today. It's made by Ben Orford. It's the Woodlander, he calls it in his range. This is a bit of a special knife, and Ben they're a bit of a dynamic duo. We have Ben and his wife Lois. She looks after all the leathercraft, but this is Eagle Ridge Survival engraved. Laser engraved. On the other side then is Ben's logo, and then on the spine here we have the tang. The spine is a tang. My kind of saying, I suppose, or maxim: fail to prepare, prepare to fail. The steel is Aebl, which is quite an old stainless steel, and it's doing the rounds now. And the beauty of it is, even though it's an old stainless steel, it doesn't have the properties of maybe the likes of RWL34 or any of these super powder steels that are very, very hard and quite brittle. The best way I could describe this, now the knife almost looks still brand new. I got it on the 24th of February and I've been using it almost exclusively since then. I just love this knife. And as you know, anyone that follows the channel, I really do promote the use of carbon steel so that on a knife blade, so that we have that last ditch method of ignition, you know, of any hard stone over the scale of 7 on the Mohs scale will produce a spark off carbon steel. This sadly will not, unless we come across something that has iron pyrite in it. But it has a huge amount of advantages for me. This is the knife that I will be predominantly using in the upcoming season when I'm teaching survival. And you may well say, why move away from carbon steel? Well, I haven't moved away entirely, but I will say a few things that I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years teaching survival. On a course, if I have maybe 8 students, and no matter where their knowledge is, I have to meet them at the point of the road where they are at. My day is not spent showing off or making me look good. My ego has nothing to do with the day that I spend teaching people on a course. The day is all about the student, and therefore the student's tools have to be maintained, which means my knife can quite often get forgotten about entirely, and hence the absolute benefit of Aebl. Now, what I like about this steel, for someone that's used to using a tool steel, let's say 01, 1095, that kind of steel, this is very, very reminiscent to that. It sharpens like it, it's tough like it, and it is easy to sharpen like it. So unlike, say, a 3V or an RWL34, I know 3V is not necessarily a stainless, but it doesn't have that difficult edge to work with, and it doesn't have that edge fragility that maybe some of those harder steels has. So it's I suppose, for want of a better word, it's a stainless 01, if you could imagine. That's the best I could describe it. Now, this knife, this is 100% an all-weather knife. We have stainless bolts in the tang. We have micarta, which is like my absolute favourite handle material. Yeah, it's not as pretty as wood, but for what I want to use this knife for, it seems to become more tacky when wet and bloody. So it's fantastic in that regard. The spine on this is crazy, crazy sharp. I'll show you that now in a minute. And I suppose, in terms of a Genesis, a little bit smaller than a Genesis. It came with this Kydex sheet. I took the hip attachment off it, so I just have this Kydex, and I carry this pretty much exclusively now as a neck knife. It's not too heavy that you can carry as a neck knife. You have a full tang knife, you have that strength, and it's just nice. It's my neck knife carry all the time. I don't have a problem with it. Generally, I don't carry knives upside down in their sheath, but the retention on this is so good. Like, I mean, it's crazy well made sheath, never mind the knife, because the retention is just right. It's not so hard that you have to really yank on it to get it out, and it's not pinching the blade anywhere, but yet you could parachute jump with this thing. So anyhow, I'm going to show you a couple of things that I've made with this over the last while. I've been kind of stuck at home the last week or so with 3 slip discs. So you might say a hobo fishing reel. Why would you make a hobo fishing reel, and what purpose would that have realistically in a survival scenario? Well, probably very little really, but it's good fun for me to do while I'm at home laid up. However, I did take this piece of sycamore and I did batten it down to a working length of about that length, and then I cross battened it again to form these two. So what I learned about that then in a survival scenario is I know that this size blade is big enough to batten almost wrist thick type, cross batten almost wrist thick sized wood. So it's perfect for making shelter if I need to make shelter in a survival scenario. I also made a little net needle gauge with it, because if Morris Kahansky said your knife must be able to make a net needle gauge, well, what Morris Kahansky says goes, and it's as simple as that. In addition to that, I just threw together a quick kind of figure of 4 trap. And my thinking is that if your knife can be strong enough to make shelter, i.e. batten, cross batten anything as thick as that, and of course ingrain batten it to break it down to digestible chunks for fire, if it can make a net needle, because you know we've covered net needle and we cover making nets on the courses, it's an important part of long-term survival. And also it's very important to know that your knife can perform these dexterous tasks, because realistically, once your knife can handle this wrist thick type material, that's all your fire and shelter requirements met. After that, we need it to be small enough that it can actually make the tools that we make life continue with, such as traps and stuff like that. So there's our figure 4 trap. It can make that. So once a knife can do these things, I'm pretty happy in the fact that this is a survival knife, not necessarily a bushcraft knife. So we'll do a little bit of battening here with you anyhow. And like we said, this is about as thick as we're going to be going in terms of any kind of battening. Now this is a 4mm spine, so it does separate wood quite well. And I might be a bit slow on this because talking about 4mm spines, my spine is not working the greatest at the moment. And we can see this is working its way through. Like, I mean, you don't have to go absolutely crazy, we can take our time. There's a few knots in this as well. And like I said, if we can get through this, we're happy in the knowledge that this knife can perform perfectly well as a wood survival knife. So just to give you a look, this is quite gnarly, a little bit more gnarly than you would probably choose in a survival scenario, but there's purpose for that. There's method in the madness. If it can handle this, well, it's going to handle pretty much anything. And the 4mm spine, I'm surprised how well this carves. Now, testing this against other knives that I have been used in the past, like you can see that is quite a challenging piece of timber. And like I said, not what we would pick in a survival scenario. But Ben really does a fantastic job on the metallurgy on these. However he gives them a heat treat, because it is fantastic. Now, I generally, with my Scandi knives, when I get them, put a tiny little micro bevel in terms of a strap on the belt or whatever, just to give it that little bit more resilience, knowing that we will be using it as survival tasks. But when I'm sharpening it, I go back to that flat grind, so I'm not actually putting a secondary bevel, I'm just kind of strapping a little bit higher than the actual full flat grind. Now we've battened through that there now, and there are absolutely no nicks or any form of damage there, which is really good. The beauty of this knife is you can use it a hell of a lot and it still looks brand new with that Aebl. I've done a fair bit, I do a good bit of game prep every day anyhow, keeping birds of prey, but it's very good for that also. So a little bit of cotton wool here, and we'll check the spine on it. Now I know what the spine is on it, I know it's really, really good. But you don't have to take my word for it, because we're going to show you. So of late, this is my spine, my ferro rod striker, this Speedy Sharpie, and I really have never seen anything like it. It just hogs sparks off, you know. But I do believe that it's still important to have a 90-degree spine on your knife, and we'll give this a strike here. You can see it's very aggressive, very, very aggressive. And there we go, one strike. Like, that is just an incredible spine for striking a ferro rod. It really, really is. So guys, that's us for this installment. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks to Ben and Lois Orford. It's a great knife. I'm really happy with it, and like, I mean, it's, you know, some knives you just gel with really, really quickly. I've done a lot of carving with this knife over the last few months, and I've never gotten a hot spot on it or whatever. And you know what, it's hard to fault. I have a lot of knives. It's definitely up there in my very, very top favorite knives. It just does everything that a knife could really do. I'm just looking at it admiring it because I like it that much still. So guys, thanks for dropping by, and we'll see you soon. Take care.